In 1984, a letter arrived at the Green River Task Force in Seattle. 22 pages, handwritten. The author claimed he could help catch the serial killer terrorizing the Pacific Northwest. He wrote, quote, "Do not ask me why I believe I am an expert in this area. Just accept that I am, and we will start from there." The letter came from Florida State Prison, from death row, from Ted Bundy. For 14 years, Bundy had maintained his innocence. He had charmed reporters, manipulated attorneys, and stonewalled every detective who tried to crack him. Dozens of investigators had failed to extract a single confession. And yet, in his final 72 hours alive, Ted Bundy would confess to over 30 murders across 7 states, reveal the locations of missing remains, and provide details so specific that investigators knew only the killer could possess them. This is the story of how they finally broke him, and the psychological technique that succeeded where everything else failed. Welcome to the Interrogation Files, where power, psychology, and control are decoded, and you learn what they do not want you to know. Today, I'm going to break down the interrogation that exposed America's most infamous serial killer. I will show you the psychological techniques that failed for 14 years. I will reveal what FBI agent Bill Hagmaier and Detective Bob Keppel did differently, and I will explain how they exploited Bundy's own narcissism to unlock his darkest secrets. By the end, you will understand why the most dangerous interrogation approach is sometimes no interrogation at all. To understand how investigators finally broke Bundy, you first need to understand why he was so difficult to crack. Ted Bundy was not your typical suspect. He had studied psychology at the University of Washington. He had worked at a suicide crisis hotline. He had been accepted to law school. When detectives sat across from him, they were not facing a nervous criminal. They were facing someone who understood exactly what they were trying to do. After his final arrest in February 1978, Pensacola police brought him in for questioning about the Chi Omega sorority murders. Bundy had beaten 2 women to death and attacked 3 others in their sleep just weeks earlier. The evidence was overwhelming. But in that interrogation room, Bundy turned the tables. He analyzed the detectives analyzing him. He gave verbose answers that said nothing. He played games with every question. Sheriff Ken Katsaris later observed that Bundy was a very careful thinker who said only what he wanted to say, nothing more. The standard approaches failed. Direct confrontation made him defensive. Accusatory questioning shut him down completely. FBI agents who came at him aggressively got nowhere. Bundy seemed to enjoy the chess match more than he feared the consequences. Journalist Stephen Michaud spent hours recording interviews with Bundy in 1980 and later described the experience as a game of chutes and ladders. Every time Michaud got close to something real, Bundy would claim faulty memory or fall into long silences. The interviews produced hundreds of hours of tape and almost no usable confessions. Here is what those early interrogators did not understand. They were trying to break down Bundy's defenses, but his defenses were not walls. They were mirrors. Every accusation reflected back. Every pressure tactic became a game he could win. The more they pushed, the more control he felt. Standard interrogation assumes the subject wants to escape the room. Bundy wanted to stay in it. He wanted the attention. He wanted the intellectual combat. And as long as interrogators gave him that, he had no reason to confess to anything. The breakthrough came from 2 men who understood something critical about narcissistic psychology. You cannot defeat a narcissist by attacking them. You defeat them by feeding them. Detective Bob Keppel had first encountered Bundy's case in 1974, during his 2nd week as a homicide detective in Seattle. A decade later, when Bundy reached out, offering to help catch the Green River Killer, Keppel recognized an opportunity, but he did not walk into that prison unprepared. Before meeting Bundy, Keppel consulted with forensic psychiatrist Dr. John Liebert to establish what he called a firm foundation in the psychology of game-playing narcissists. He developed specific rules for engaging Bundy. First, question the subject at his level. Use the same vocabulary, the same sentence structure. Do not ask questions over his head intellectually, and do not ask questions below his level either. Most importantly, Keppel planned to test Bundy's deception patterns. He would ask questions with obviously false premises just to observe Bundy's style, his body language, his word choices when defending what he knew to be true. This gave Keppel a baseline for recognizing lies. FBI Special Agent Bill Hagmaier took a different but complementary approach. He was one of only 5 original agents in the Behavioral Analysis Unit, and senior profilers had warned him that Bundy had a known distaste for FBI agents. Previous agents had failed to get anything useful. Hagmaier ignored the standard playbook entirely. Instead of pursuing confessions, he positioned himself as a researcher seeking to understand. He shared personal details about his own life, his family, even the fact that he had hitchhiked to college. He created what psychologists call reciprocity, the social pressure to return openness with openness. The first meeting set the tone. Bundy challenged him immediately. "You think I killed people? Why should I help you?" Hagmaier promised he would never directly ask Bundy if he had killed anybody. He was not there to prove guilt. He was there to understand. Bundy tested him further. If it was your job, would you pull the switch? Hagmaier did not flinch. Well, if you deserved it and it was my job, you are toast. Bundy laughed. Maybe we can talk. That exchange reveals the technique. Hagmaier was honest, even uncomfortably so. He did not pretend to be Bundy's friend. He did not fake sympathy. He treated Bundy like a scientific specimen worthy of academic study, something rare and valuable that deserved serious examination. For a narcissist, this is irresistible. Bundy had spent years being treated as a monster, a puzzle to solve, a case to close. Hagmaier treated him as an expert in his own psychology, and Bundy could not resist the chance to be understood on his own terms. Over the next 4 years, their conversations accumulated into more than 200 hours of recorded interviews, the longest in FBI history with a serial killer. And eventually, Bundy began describing his crimes, not as confessions, not with the word I, but through what he called the third-person narrative. He would speak of this person, or the individual, or the entity. He described his violent urges as a malignant condition outside his control, something that happened to him rather than something he chose. This technique served multiple purposes. It let him discuss crimes without legal self-incrimination. It protected his self-image. And it let him believe, or pretend to believe, that the man committing murders was somehow separate from the man having this intellectual conversation. Criminal psychologist Dr. Ken Muscatel later analyzed these recordings and called them pure performance, pure manipulation, utterly narcissistic with no genuine emotion expressed. But here's the critical insight. Performance was the point. Bundy needed an audience. He needed to feel like the most interesting person in the room. And Hagmaier gave him exactly that while carefully documenting everything Bundy revealed. Eventually, Bundy told Hagmaier something that revealed how deeply this approach had worked. He said, "You and your buddies are like fishermen standing by the lake. You throw simple bait, and it sinks just a few feet before you catch the inexperienced ones. But experienced serial killers live at the bottom of the lake where police cannot find them. But I have been down there under that water, and if I trust you, I will take you down there with me." The clock changed everything. In January 1989, Bundy's final appeal was denied. His execution date was set for January 24th. After 14 years of maintaining control, Bundy suddenly had none. He had one final card to play, what investigators called the bones for time strategy. He would trade confession details and body locations for execution stays. He contacted victims' families, hoping they would petition the governor. He wrote in his journal about needing time, about finding remains, about leveraging information for delays. Florida Governor Bob Martinez rejected this completely. He stated publicly that they would not allow the system to be manipulated, and that for Bundy to negotiate for his life over the bodies of victims was despicable. With no leverage left, something shifted in Bundy. Detective Dennis Couch from Salt Lake County secured a 90-minute interview just 36 hours before the scheduled execution. During that session, Bundy broke down crying and finally confessed directly to the Utah murders. Not in third person, not hypothetically, using the word I. In his final 72 hours, Bundy confessed to at least 30 murders across 7 states. He provided forensic details that only the killer could know. One victim, Jorgen Hawkins, had used a safety pin to hold up her bell-bottom pants because they were slightly too loose. Only someone who had seen her body up close could know that. The confessions revealed patterns that horrified even veteran investigators. Bundy admitted to decapitating approximately 12 victims with a hacksaw, keeping severed heads in his apartment as trophies. He confessed to returning to dump sites repeatedly to perform acts with decomposing remains. He told Hagmaier that if you have got time, they can be anything you want them to be. When Hagmaier asked about his core motivation, what drove him to kill, Bundy's answer was stripped of all performance. He said, "The bottom line was, I did it because I enjoyed doing it and I wanted to do it. There was no malignant entity, no possession by dark forces, just a man who killed because he wanted to." What made Bundy finally confess after 14 years of denial? 3 factors converged. First, mortality. With execution hours away, the psychological distance he had maintained collapsed. The abstract future became concrete. The entity was about to die, and that meant Ted Bundy was about to die too. Second, legacy. Bundy was obsessed with how he would be remembered. Silence meant being forgotten or misunderstood. Confession meant his story would be told on his terms, with him as the authority. Third, and most important, the interrogators had built something over 4 years that direct pressure never could. They had built trust. Not friendship, not sympathy, but a channel of communication that Bundy valued. Hagmaier later reflected that, during his last days, Bundy called him his best friend. Hagmaier did not know how to feel about that, knowing that the hand giving him a warm handshake was the same hand that held a hacksaw. The Bundy interrogations transformed FBI profiling methodology. The 200 hours of interviews contributed to the organized versus disorganized killer typology still used today. They established templates for engaging narcissistic offenders. They demonstrated that even the most controlled psychopaths will eventually talk, given the right approach, sufficient time, and the pressure of mortality. A 2025 study in the Journal of Police and Criminal Psychology analyzed confessions from 45 serial killers and found 84% exhibited what researchers call vulnerable enmity, meaning envy, suspicion, and projection of hostility. 76% exhibited grandiose admiration, meaning self-promotion, charm, and a drive to be seen as superior. Serial killers move between swagger and fragility, and understanding this pattern is essential to breaking through their defenses. The research confirms what Keppel and Hagmeyer discovered through trial and error. You cannot attack a narcissist into confession. You have to create conditions where confession serves their ego. So what can you take from the Bundy interrogations, whether you are in law enforcement, negotiation, or simply trying to understand manipulation when you encounter it? First, recognize that aggressive pressure often backfires with narcissistic personalities. The more you push, the more they resist. Their identity depends on not being controlled. Second, understand that narcissists need an audience. If you can position yourself as that audience, as someone genuinely trying to understand rather than attack, you create a channel they want to keep open. Third, patience is not passive. Hagmeyer spent 4 years building trust before the major confessions came. That patience was not weakness, it was strategy. Fourth, and this is crucial, watch for the third person tell. When someone describes events using the individual, or one might, they are creating psychological distance from their own actions. This is not necessarily a sign of guilt, but it is always a sign that the subject needs to separate themselves from what they are describing. Pay attention to why. Finally, remember that even psychopaths prefer truth-telling when given the right conditions. Research shows that in controlled studies, offenders lied on only 22% of trials when given the choice. The assumption that psychopaths lie compulsively is a myth. They lie strategically. Change the strategy, and you can change the outcome. Every interrogation is a negotiation. But in this case, the negotiation took 14 years and required something counterintuitive, treating a monster like he mattered, not because he deserved it, but because that was the only door he would walk through. Bundy's final words before execution were characteristically controlled. He said, "I would like you to give my love to my family and friends." Even facing the electric chair, he performed for his audience. But by then, the performance had already revealed everything. You have been briefed. What you do with this knowledge is your call. If this changed how you see conversations, subscribe. Every interrogation follows a playbook. I will decode them all.